Baruch Hashem. Today's daf yomi is Avodah Zarah daf Lamed Ches, Avodah Zarah 38, and we're going to start at the bottom of 37b, three lines above where the lines get wide. Today's daf is dedicated for a shmir for the Chayalim, Matzal for the Shvuyim, and Yeshua for Am Yisrael. This is the daf yomi for Shabbos, Rosh Chodesh Av, which we're recording on Friday. The Gemara says that the shlakos, the cooked foods of the idolaters, are prohibited. So the Gemara asks, Minani Mili, what's the source for this? So Amar Rabbi Amar Yochanan Amar Prav, based upon a pasuk that Moshe Rabbeinu says to Sichon before he goes into his territory. He says, Ochel b'kesef tashbirini, you'll provide me food for money, v'achalti, and I'll eat it. Mayim b'kesef titeli, and you'll give me water for money, v'shasisi, and I'll drink. And the Gemara has a limud, kamayim, that it has to be like water. My mayim, what am I drinking? I'm drinking the water of the idolaters. My mayim shonishtan, just like water has not changed. Af ochel shonishtan, also food items that I have not changed. So only food items have not changed. But if it was cooked, then it's not going to be able to be eaten. So the Gemara asks the question, well, if that's the case, well, if that's the case, what about, so if that's the case, asks Gemara, chitin vasan kolos, what about wheat berries, basically, that he made into grain, which we assume he put them in an oven and dried them. These should also be prohibited. If you want to say it's prohibited, and if you have wheat and you made it into parched grain, it's permitted. And so therefore, we see from here, even though it's changed, it's prohibited. It's permitted. So the Gemara says, "Oh, kamayim." It has to be like water. Just like water has not been transformed from the matter which was created. So too, food that has not been changed from the manner in which it was created. And the wheat kernels, their form has been changed by it becoming. Their form is not changed. Elmeat, if that's the case, what about if you grind up the wheat and thereby you change the form? Could you say it's prohibited? But don't we learn the Brisa? It says that if you grind up the parched grain into flour, then it's permitted. So we see, even though it's changed, it's permitted. Just like water. Or just like water that was not changed as a consequence of fire. Meaning to say, it didn't get changed as a result of fire, it got changed. Just like the water was not changed as a result of fire. So only food that was changed for fire is prohibited, but if it's not changed through fire, then it's permitted. So the Gemara says, midday orcs, if it doesn't say anything about fire in the Torah, so the whole concept of why we're on the top of 38a, well, why Bishul Akum is prohibited is that it's rabbinic. They cross Malchtabam, and the verse is just support for it. So the Gemara says, Midrabanan, what does it mean, rabbinic? Rashi says that we're worried that they're going to feed the Jew non-kosher food. Tosfos gives a different explanation, that we're concerned that it'll lead to warm relations, and so therefore I will come to marry them. Tosfos quotes Rav Avram ben Rabbi David that for sure cooked food is prohibited when the idolater cooks it in his house. But if he cooks in the house of the Jew, we don't have to be concerned about chasnas, and we also don't have to be concerned that he's giving you non-kosher ingredients. Rabbeinu Tam did not agree with that, because he says since the idolater, once he's cooking it, the rabbis don't draw a distinction between whose house it is, and you always have to be concerned. Also, so no matter where. So Rabbeinu Tam rejects that explanation. Anything which could be eaten raw, we don't have this concern of bishul akum if the food can be eaten raw. In Surah they taught as follows. Pumpadisa they taught as follows. Anything that's not eaten on the table of a king, to dip the bread in it, we don't have this concern. What's the difference between the first approach, which says that if it's raw, bishul akum doesn't apply, and the second approach, which says that if it's eaten, the first approach, if it could be eaten raw, it doesn't apply, and the second approach, which says that if it could be it only applies if it's food eaten on the table of a king. The difference between them is small fish and mushrooms and porridge. That those things are not eaten raw, and they don't, but they don't go on the table of the king. So according to the first approach, bishul akum applies because they're not eaten raw. But according to the second approach, since they don't go on the table of the king, it doesn't apply. Amar Avasi Amar Rav, dagim ketanim meluchin. If you have small fish that are salted, and therefore they're not actually cooked, they're eaten just salted, then bishul akum doesn't apply, presumably because they're not cooked, they're just salted. Rav Yosef imtsoan ovekochavim somach Yisrael mishum eruve tavshilin. So Rav Yosef says, let's say an idolater roasted them. Let's say the idolater roasted this food. Then we're going to say a Jew can rely upon them for erev tavshilin. So therefore, because since it can be eaten raw, we don't need them to be cooked. And so if he cooks, it doesn't make it prohibited. Gemara says, the Abdul Ovik Kasa Daharsana, that if the idolater made it into a Kasa Daharsana, which is like he fried the fish in like fish fat and flour, also that's prohibited because that's something that is cooked by the idolater. Pshit, it's obvious. So the Gemara says, you might have thought the flour is prohibited. Excuse me, you might have thought that the fish fat is the main ingredient. And so since fish fat could be eaten raw, therefore the whole sauce should be permitted. Kamasho and kimchi, we see that the flour is the main ingredient. So therefore that's why it's going to be prohibited. Amar Rav Bruna Marav Ovikachavim Shehitzit Esaor Bagam. Let's say idolater started a fire in the swamp. Kol Chagavim Shebe'agam Asur, and all the grasshoppers that were killed by this fire are prohibited. What's the case? If you say he doesn't know which one of the burnt ones is kosher, which is non-kosher, what does it matter who started the fire, even if a Jew started it? So you mean say maybe it's prohibited because it's cooked by an idolater? Why is it prohibited? If an idolater singed the head of an animal to remove its hair, you're allowed to eat from it, even the tips of its ears, even though they got partially cooked. So, we see that since he intended just to remove the hair and not to cook it, it's permitted. Here too, since he was only intending to basically uncover the ground of the swamp, therefore it shouldn't be prohibited. So the Gemara says, so it's not prohibited because of bishul akum. It's just he doesn't know which of the grasshoppers. He can't tell which is kosher and which is not kosher. And this incident happened. It just happened to be that an idolater started the fire, and so that's why I gave that ruling. Gufa Amarav Chanan Bar Ami Amar Pedas Amar Yochanan. If an idolater singed the ears of the animal, you can even eat from the tips of the ears. If there's an idolater who threw a wet peg into an oven, and so therefore he turns on the oven to draw out the peg, the cover by Yisrael kara meikara, and the Jew had already put a squash in there, and it now cooked shapir dummy. It's okay, because he didn't intend to cook. The idolater didn't intend to cook. Pshit, it's obvious. So the Gemara says, no, we had to read. We needed it. You might have thought that he's cooking, but he's cooking a utensil. And he's not cooking it. He's just strengthening it. And so therefore it's not considered cooking. Let's say a Jew put a piece of meat on the fire. The adulterer comes along and flips it, mutter, it's permitted. It doesn't make it non-kosher. What's the case? If you want to say if the adulterer wouldn't have flipped it, it would have still cooked. Pshita, it's obvious it's kosher. But if he didn't turn it, it wouldn't have cooked. My mutter, why is it permitted? Isn't this something that the idolater cooked? We're talking about a case where if he didn't flip it, it would cook in 2 hours. Now it cooks in 1 hour. So you might have thought that since he made it cook quicker, that's a milsa, that's something, and therefore it's prohibited. Kamasha when it's not. Mara says, Didn't we learn anything once it's cooked? Like basically 1/3 of the usual time, then there's no longer bishuli akum. So but if it's not like that, so in this case, if it's not cooked already 1/3 and he flips it, it should be prohibited. So Gemara says no. The case here is he put the food in a basket, and the idolater put it in the oven. So the Jew had finished what he was doing. So therefore, that's what Rabbi Yossi is saying, where the Jew had finished what he was doing, and so then it's going to be prohibited unless it was initially cooked to Ben Drosai. But in Rabbi Yehuda's case, the food would become completely cooked. It just would have taken longer. A Jew can put, we have a price that supports this, a Jew can put meat on the coals. The idolater comes along and flips it. Until the Jew comes from the synagogue or the Beis Medrash. So the Jew puts the meat on the coals, and an idolater comes and flips it before the Jew comes back from the synagogue or Beis Medrash. Doesn't have to be concerned. A woman can put a pot on the stove, and the idolater can stir it till she comes from the bathhouse or the synagogue. So we don't have to be concerned. So we see as long as the Jew begins the process, idolater can finish it. Let's say the idolater put the meat on the fire, and the Jew is the one who just turned it. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, kal v'chomer. It's for sure okay. Gemara be out of mutter. Gemara be out Yisrael kotzkein. The idolater is the one who finished it. It's okay for sure. If the Jew finished it, it should be okay. Whether the Jew flipped it or the idolater flipped it, mutter. It's permitted. It's only prohibited when the beginning and the end comes from the idolater. The law is, let's say you have oven, let's say you have bread where the idolater made the fire and then the Jew baked it. Or the Jew made the fire and the idolater baked it. Even if the idolater made the fire and baked the bread, but all the Jew did was stir the coals, then it's kosher. Let's say you have salted fish. Chizkiah Shari. Chizkiah says it's okay because it doesn't need to be cooked. The idolater salted and now it doesn't need to be cooked. So Chizkiah says it's okay, you could eat it. Rabbi Yochanan prohibits it. He says salting is cooking it. Beitzis Liya, roasted egg, bar kapara shari. Rabbi Yochanan also, bar kapara allows it because since he touched, the question is, can he get to the edible part of the egg? Kiasar of Dimi Amar Achad Dag Muliach Achad Beit Tzliach Chizkiah Bar Kapara Sharo Rabbi Yochanan Aser. So it's a dispute in the Talmud about both about the fish, the salted fish, and the roasted egg. V'chia Parva equal Beireshku. So they came to the house of Beireshku. Amarle Beit Tzliach. They said, "What's the law for the roasted egg?" Amarlu Chizkiah Bar Kapara Sharo Rabbi Yochanan Aser. He says this dispute. Vein Dvarav Shoach B'Makom Shneim. An opinion of one is nothing in the face of two. So therefore, the egg by the idolater is permitted. Amol Rav Zvid, Votatzitue. Don't listen to him. Hachi Am Rabbi, Helchas Hakavasi to Rabbi Yochanan. Was with like Rabbi Yochanan. It's prohibited. Ashkiu Naguta Dechalav Nachnashe. They gave Rav Zvid a cup of vinegar to drink, and he died. Rabbanan hakaprisen. These are caper berries, caputos, and leeks, vamitalia. And this is like a where's going to tell us what this is? Vachamin, hot water, vakoyos, the parched grain, shalahen, mutaran. All these things are permitted. Beitzet soya, asuya, roasted egg is prohibited. Shemen, if it's oil, or biuda, natsu beistino, nimno lavitiru, oil they allowed. Taya. He hamtala he fislaya he shiasa. My shiasa. What is shiasa? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, Amar Rabbi Yochanan. Arban shan denafik hayuvdim mitzrayim. So it's 40 years since this incident happened in Egypt. Rabbi Yochanan didei Amar hayshisin shan denafik hayuvdim mitzrayim. 60 years. V'lo pligi. And they're not arguing. Mar b'shnei, mar b'shnei. Each one's referring to his years. Meaning Rabbi Yochanan said it 4 years after it happened, and Rabbi Yochanan said it 20 years later. Ma'asu bizur the karpas. So they brought seeds of the karpas. Second time we had karpas in our Masechta. Ubizur the kitna and seeds of flax. Ubizur the shavuita and seeds of fenugreek. The taru ba'ade adade b'pashuri, and they soaked them together in warm water. V'shavku le'ad the and they let it there until it began to grow. Ma'isi chatbi chadati. And then they brought new barrels, and they filled them with water. Tarabu gargishta, and they soaked clay in them, and the seeds attached to the clay. Then they entered the bathhouse. And by the time they left, they had come forth shoots. And they ate them. The karami binte, atu for the karel. And they became chilled from the hair of the heads to the toenails of their feet. It's not true. It's just words. Seeds cannot make shoots in such a short time. They use like words with words, meaning they used incantation. The kuspan is the refuse of the dates that were used to make beer. They would then pour on hot water and eat them. If the water was heated in a large pot, also the small pot in a large pot is prohibited, but in a small pot it will be permitted. In a large pot, we're worried that the water absorbs the flavor from the non-kosher flavor from the pot. But if it was small, we assume we didn't use it for non-kosher food. What's a small pot? Anything which a young bird cannot go inside of it. It says the Gemara, maybe they cut it up and put it in. Anything where the head of the bird can't go in. Different price says no matter the size of the pot, it's permitted. It's also question is whether or not, if it gives off taste that you don't want, whether it's permitted or prohibited. And that will be the question with this pot, because the pot is giving off bad taste. So if you say no, time of kam is prohibited, then it's prohibited. If you say it's permitted, it's permitted. The boiled oil of Arameans is prohibited. So cooked oil is a problem. What are we worried about? If we're worried about mixing wine, Mr. Sorry, it would spoil the oil. What do we care if it's cooked by a doctor? Being raw. If you're worried that they're going to leave it, if you're worried that it's cooked in the pot, it gets non-kosher food. Roasting time of gamu mutter, but it gives off bad taste and it's permitted. So Rav Safra says it's okay. What about the cook date of the Armenians? The sweet one is not a problem. The vada sharo, for sure okay. But they're eating raw. The bitter ones, the vada asiri, they're for sure prohibited because they can only be in cooked. The middle ones, my. The Rebbe Aser, the Rebbe prohibited them. Umanu, who's this Rebbe? Levi. Shesisai, Rav Shari, Avodah Shmuel Levi Asri. Shisa, Rav permits and Levi, Shmuel Levi prohibited. If the shesisa is made from wheat or barley, Kol Yama will plead the Shari. Everybody agrees it's permitted. But Talafchi the Chala, if it's made with lentils and vinegar, Kol Yama will plead the Asr. Everyone says prohibited. Keep pleading, but Talafta the Maya. It's made of lentils with water. Marasavar Gazrin and Ha. One says we make a prohibition from one to the other. Marasavar Lo Gazrin. The other one says we don't. Some say with water, everybody says it's prohibited because it's confused with the shasisa made of vinegar. Sorry, the only argument when it's the wheat and barley. Marasavar Gazrin and Ha. One says we make a decree. Marasavar Lo Gazrin. The other one says we don't. On the Rav, train mini shasisa shada Barzila Giladai. Barzila the Giladai in 2 Samuel, after David ran away from Avshalom, Barzillai the Gileadite provided food for David. And he sent them 2 types of shasisa. He provided all these things to them. So Kemach v'koli refers to a different type of shasisa, which is made with kernels. Sani was shuke dinardai. And nowadays they take out the baskets upon baskets full of shasisa dinardai. And nobody's worried about it. And everybody eats it. Okay, this is today's daf. A big shkoyach to everyone. Shkoyach.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.